The Government Accountability Office, the GAO, issues Generally Accepted Government Auditing Standards, GAGAS, for use in auditing federal entities and organizations that receive federal financial assistance. They are included in a publication entitled Government Auditing Standards, more commonly called the Yellow Book. Standards apply only when required by law, regulation, or agreement. Additional requirements include ethics, audit communications, considering the results of previous audits, non-compliance with provisions of contracts and grant agreements, audit documentation, and reporting. We will discuss these on the next several slides. Ethics for government audits include 1. The public interest, observing integrity, objectivity, and independence in performing professional services assist the auditors in serving the public interest. Integrity. Public confidence in government is maintained by the auditors performing professional services with integrity. 3. Objectivity. Objectivity includes being independent in fact and appearance when providing audit and attest services, maintaining an attitude of impartiality, being intellectually honest, and being free from conflicts of interest. Similar to the AICPA, the Yellow Book contains a conceptual framework for independence. Proper use of government information, resources, and position. These items should be used for official purposes and not for the auditor's personal gain or otherwise inappropriately. And 5, professional behavior. Auditors should comply with laws and regulations and avoid any contact that might bring discredit to the auditor's work. There are additional audit documentation requirements beyond the generally accepted auditing standards. Before the report is issued, evidence of supervisory review of the work performed that supports findings, conclusions, and recommendations contained in the audit report should be present. Any departures from generally accepted government auditing standards and the impact on the audit or the auditor's conclusions should be noted. Reporting for government audits includes the independent auditor's report on the financial statements, a written report on compliance with laws and regulations and on internal control, describes the scope of tests and presents the findings of those tests. Separate reports are allowed, but reference to the other report must be made in the final paragraph. The Single Audit Act of 1984. This is a statutory requirement to test controls over compliance and compliance with program requirements. Applies to states, local governments, and nonprofit organizations that expend $500,000 or more within a fiscal year in federal financial assistance. The audit is quite extensive. Requirements include determining and reporting on the financial statements are presented fairly in all material respects in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. The schedule of expenditures of federal awards is fairly presented in all material respects in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole, and the entity complied with the provisions of laws, regulations, and contracts or grants that may have a direct and material effect on each major federal financial assistance program. An important aspect of performing an audit in accordance with the Single Audit Act is to identify the major federal financial assistance programs. Criteria are those programs to which the auditor must apply procedures to test for compliance and test the effectiveness of controls, determined by a risk-based approach. Consider the amount of the program's expenditures, the risk of material noncompliance. The auditor must test programs that in aggregate equal 50% of total federal expenditures. On the next 3 slides, let's go over specific requirements of the Single Audit Act. 1. Activities allowed or not allowed. Determine that the organization complies with the specific requirements regarding the activities allowed or not allowed by the program. 2. Allowable cost and cost principles. Determine that the organization complies with federal cost accounting policies applicable to the program. 3. Cash management. Determine that the recipient or subrecipient followed procedures to minimize the time elapsing between the transfer of funds from the U.S. Treasury or pass-through entity and their disbursement. The Davis-Bacon Act determined that wages paid are not less than those established for the locality of the project, the prevailing wage rates, by the Department of Labor. In eligibility, determined that the individuals or groups of individuals that are being provided goods or services under a program are eligible for participation in and for the levels of assistance received under that program. Continuing on with the Single Audit Act requirements. Number 6, equipment and real property management. Determine that the organization safeguards and maintains equipment purchased with federal assistance and uses the equipment for appropriate purposes. 7. Matching, level of effort, and earmarking. Determine that the organization contributes the appropriate amount of its own resources to the program. 8. Period of availability of federal funds. Determine that federal funds were spent or obligated within the period of availability. 10. Procurement and suspension and debarment. Determine that the organization uses appropriate policies for purchases with federal funds and the organization does not contract with vendors that are suspended or debarred. 10. Program income. Determine whether program income is correctly recorded and used in accordance with the program requirements. And 11. Real property acquisition and relocation assistance. Determine that the organization complied with property acquisition, appraisal, negotiation, and residential relocation requirements. The final Single Audit Act requirements are 12. Reporting. Determine that the organization has complied with prescribed reporting requirements. 13. Sub-recipient monitoring. Determine whether recipients monitor the compliance of sub-recipients. And 14. Special tests and provisions. Determine that the organization complies with other significant specific requirements that apply to the program. In evaluating the results of the single audit, consider frequency of noncompliance, whether it results in material amount of questioned cost expenditure that the auditor questions on the grounds that it does not meet the criteria for allowing ability, program eligibility, or other requirements, or is not adequately supported with the documentation. Consider actual amounts and projected amounts from samples. Must report all questioned costs that exceed $10,000. The report should state whether the schedule of expenditures of federal awards is fairly presented in all material respects in relation to the financial statements taken as a whole, whether the entity complied with the provisions of laws, regulations, and contracts or grants that may have a direct and material effect on each major federal financial assistance program, and the work performed on internal control relating to major federal financial assistance programs.